J.D. Vance, the junior senator from Ohio, has quickly established himself as a distinct voice in Republican foreign policy circles. Known for his sharp intellect and populist leanings, Vance brings a unique perspective to the table. His views are often described as America first, prioritizing American interests and challenging the traditional consensus on global engagement. Vance's political journey began with his surprise victory in the 2022 Ohio Senate race. He campaigned on a platform critical of globalization and traditional trade deals, arguing that they had hollowed out the American middle class. This focus on the economic concerns of working-class Americans has become a hallmark of his political identity and significantly influences his foreign policy outlook. While a staunch conservative, Vance's foreign policy views don't always neatly align with traditional Republican orthodoxy. He expresses skepticism towards military interventionism and questions the sustainability of America's expansive global commitments. Instead, he calls for a more restrained foreign policy, one that prioritizes American interests and avoids costly entanglements abroad. Regardless of where one stands, there's no doubt that J.D. Vance is a force to be reckoned with in the realm of American foreign policy. One area where J.D. Vance's foreign policy views align closely with traditional Republican thinking is in his unwavering support for Israel. He sees the Jewish state as a vital strategic ally in a volatile region and a beacon of democracy in a sea of authoritarianism. Vance has consistently criticized the Biden administration's policies towards Israel, accusing it of undermining the U.S.-Israel relationship. As a devout Christian, he sees a special significance in the land of Israel and believes in upholding America's commitment to its security. He has condemned the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, calling it anti-Semitic and harmful to the prospects of peace. Vance's staunch support for Israel has earned him praise from pro-Israel groups and Republican lawmakers. While a steadfast supporter of Israel, J.D. Vance expresses significant reservations about U.S. military interventionism in the Middle East. He argues that past interventions, such as the Iraq War, have been costly failures that have drained American resources and entangled the United States in intractable conflicts. Vance's skepticism towards interventionism stems from his belief that the United States should prioritize its own interests and avoid costly entanglements abroad. Instead, he advocates for a more restrained approach, one that focuses on diplomacy, economic engagement, and working with regional partners. While acknowledging the threat posed by Iran's nuclear ambitions and support for terrorism, he opposes direct U.S. military strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities. Vance's preference for restraint in the Middle East resonates with a growing segment of the American public, weary of endless wars. The ongoing Russia-Ukraine war has presented a significant challenge to American foreign policy, forcing policymakers to grapple with difficult questions about the extent of U.S. involvement in European security. J.D. Vance's stance on the war has been a subject of much debate, highlighting his willingness to challenge conventional wisdom and advocate for a rethinking of America's global commitments. Vance has been a vocal critic of the Biden administration's handling of the war, arguing that it has failed to articulate a clear strategy and has allowed the conflict to drag on unnecessarily. He argues that the war in Ukraine, while tragic, is primarily a European security concern, and that European nations should bear the brunt of the responsibility for resolving it. Vance's views reflect a growing sentiment among some Americans who are wary of further U.S. involvement in foreign conflicts. J.D. Vance views China as the most significant geopolitical challenge facing the United States in the 21st century. He believes that China's communist government poses a fundamental threat to American values, interests, and security. Vance argues that the United States must adopt a more assertive approach to counter China's growing influence and protect its own interests. He is deeply critical of China's economic practices, which he views as predatory and unfair. Beyond economics, Vance is also troubled by China's human rights record, condemning its persecution of religious minorities and treatment of Uyghur Muslims. Vance argues that the United States must stand up for its values and hold China accountable for its human rights abuses. J.D. Vance's foreign policy positions offer a distinct perspective on America's role in the world. His America First approach, characterized by a skepticism of military interventionism, a focus on great power competition with China, and a desire to reduce America's global commitments, has resonated with a segment of the American public. Vance's views, while controversial, have injected a much-needed dose of realism into foreign policy debates. His emphasis on prioritizing American interests reflects a growing recognition that the United States cannot be the world's policeman. As the United States navigates an increasingly complex and uncertain world, Vance's voice is likely to remain a prominent one in shaping the future of American foreign policy.